Hello, I am Ariel, and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to do this lesson today because I know that when you make this one small correction in your pronunciation, you are going to correct maybe hundreds or literally thousands of possible errors that you might be making right now, or that you might have made in the past. But once you watch this video and understand the small change that you need to make, you will be able to correct all of those errors. And that's an important thing to be able to do when one small change affects a lot. Okay, so let's get started. What is this lesson about? This lesson is about the word or the sound of or when it's used in a word. So what happens is that most of the time, students say it correctly when or is at the beginning of a word. But a lot of English learners make mistakes when or appears in the middle of a phrase, and definitely when it appears at the end of a word. Lots and lots of mistakes are made in pronunciation here. So what we are going to do is go step by step to see what happens to this sound at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of a word or phrase. Okay, let's begin. When or the letters or appear at the beginning or by themselves, then or stays like or. The word or, which you know by itself, is pronounced or. There is no change. It is stressed and it is strong. Okay, let's look at some words with or. The word or by itself is pronounced or. Also, organize, ornament, orphan, organic, orchard. Okay, what did you hear here? That or sounds like or, right? So far you're saying, okay, what's the big deal? The big deal is over here. So make sure you keep watching. All right, let's look at some examples. That's an order. You can read it with me, or you can repeat it after me, whatever you like. The more you participate, the more you will master what you need to learn. It's an oral exam. Okay, not written, oral. This table is very ordinary. Again, or is being pronounced like or. She works for a large organization. Organization, good. The orchestra was amazing. All right. So we saw that whether we were saying the word by itself or whether the word appeared in a sentence, the pronunciation of or remained the same. It remained like or. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Let's see what happens when we find the word or in the middle of a phrase. Now we come to what happens when the word or appears in the middle of a phrase. When you are speaking, you don't have to do this, but you do have to know that native speakers will do this. So this part will help you to understand them better. If you don't want to speak like this, don't speak like this. You already do this. This is to help you understand better. And this last part is going to be very, very important to correct some of the things that you say. So hang in there for the last part, okay? But let's do this part now. So what happens when or is used in the middle of a phrase? Then or is basically a function word, and function words are shortened or reduced. They're not only shortened or reduced, they're also linked, usually to a word that comes before and sometimes to the word that comes after. All right, So let's see how this works. Here, I've just written some phrases first, and then later, we'll see how it works in a sentence. Okay? Ready? Here we go. Lunch or dinner. We don't say lunch or dinner when we're speaking in regular conversation. Instead, or would be connected to the word before it, and it will sound like lunch or dinner. The or now sounds like lunch or dinner. Soup or salad, rain or shine. 7 or 8. Do you see how the or now sounds like Okay, let's continue. Would you like tea or coffee? Tea or coffee sounds like tea or coffee. Now, if you're not used to it, you might wonder what people are saying. But when you understand that the word or gets reduced, shortened, and linked to a word before or after, it will help you understand what people are offering you, right? They're not offering you tears. They're offering you tea or coffee. Again, you don't have to speak like this, but you do need to understand it. Next, should I turn left or right? Left or right sounds like left or right. Am I right or wrong? Right or wrong sounds like right or wrong. Again, you see what's in red is what is linked. What happens? Look at what happens when it's linked to the word after, which happens sometimes. Number 4. Shall we talk now or later? Okay, so now the or got connected to the word after it, and that's okay. That happens too. Number 5. You can call or send me an email. Okay, so that is also possible. It could be linked to the word before or the word after. Now, you're going to come to the most exciting part, where you're going to change your pronunciation of a whole lot of words, maybe hundreds and thousands of words. Counting these expressions, there are probably thousands. Let's look at what happens when or appears at the end of a word. Okay, so now we come to the most critical part. The part where many students make a mistake in the pronunciation of or, and that is at the end of a word. What happens is your eyes deceive you. Your eyes see or, and you want to say or, but in fact, when it comes at the end of a word, you need to say and not or. So, you need to say not the sound or, but the sound Repeat after me. Now, we sound a little bit robotic, but it won't sound like that once we actually say it in a word. What happens when or appears at the end of a word? It becomes reduced, shortened, and we don't stress it as much as when we were saying it at the beginning of a word. Okay, so what I want you to do is to imagine that all these words down here, which in fact end in or, sound exactly like all these words in this line, which end in Usually when you see at the end of a word like dancer or teacher, you don't have a problem pronouncing it, right? You say it correctly because you see and say the sound. So what you need to do is take that same principle and apply it to all of these words. Even though your eyes will see or, your brain and your mouth have to be trained to say the sound and not the or sound. Okay, so do it with me. First, we'll practice and get our mouths to remember the sound of Okay, ready? Say it after me, or with me. Dancer, teacher, baker, farmer, waiter. In all of those words, of course, they were spelled with and they had the sound. Now, all of these words are going to be spelled with or, but you're still going to say Okay, here we go. Actor, doctor, author, mayor. Okay, those are people. Now, let's look at some things, ideas, or other words. Factor. You know, there is a very popular show called Fear Factor. I hope you're saying factor and not factor. Factor, color, terror, honor, error. Don't make an error when you're pronouncing the word error. Don't say error, say roar. Okay, let's keep going. These were shorter words with 2 syllables, but the same principle applies even if we have longer words, like here, with 3 syllables. Ready? Here we go. Professor, visitor, bachelor, survivor, another popular show, right? Okay, also some more things. Monitor, reactor, like a nuclear reactor, behavior, equator. What's the equator? The equator is an imaginary line that goes around the Earth and divides it between the northern and southern hemispheres. Now, let's look at some longer words. Ambassador, supervisor, terminator. Okay, a lot of people have seen that movie. Elevator, refrigerator, calculator. Excellent. Thank you for sticking with me in this lesson, because if you did make this mistake, then you have just corrected something very major. You've corrected so many words that you could possibly say in your English-speaking life. Now let's move to the pronunciation of words ending with tian, cyan, kian, and tian. All of these are pronounced shun at the end. The spellings are different, but the pronunciation is always shun. I'm going to read through them so that you can hear how they sound. Action, condition, direction, location, mention, nation, station, discussion, expression, mansion. If you're not familiar with that, it means a big, important-looking house. Pension, profession, session, version. So, shun, 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 all the way through. Now, let's move on to words ending in cyan. These also follow the same shun pronunciation. Electrician, magician, musician, optician, politician, suspicion. Even though this one, suspicion, is spelled with scion, it's still pronounced shun, politician, suspicion. Now, let's look at words spelled with tian. For some reason, they all have capital letters because they refer to places. Egyptian, Martian, from the planet Mars. Venetian, from Venice in Italy. So all these different spellings result in shun at the end. Now let's move to a second sound. These words look similar because they also have cyan, just like the words we just saw. However, this time, the pronunciation is jun, not shun. It's a heavier sound. In fact, esh and zech are paired consonants. The only difference is that zech is heavier and uses more vibration in the vocal cords. Let's practice. Collision, conclusion, decision, occasion, revision, television. I exaggerated the sound to show the difference, but I'll read them again in a normal way. Collision, conclusion, decision, occasion, revision, television. Now let's move to a third sound, which is chun. You wouldn't expect this because these words are spelled with tian or tun, yet the pronunciation is chun. Here are some examples: Christian, question, suggestion. Again, I exaggerated that a bit. Now I'll read them naturally. Christian, question, suggestion. There's no real rule to follow about whether a word should end in shun, jun, or chun. It's just something you have to learn with each word. But at least you can see that most words end with shun. Now let's move on to a pronunciation secret that will help you say English words more easily and correctly, especially long, difficult ones. This is actually a professional technique used by actors, singers, and linguists, people who learn many languages and need to pronounce words correctly and authentically. The reason pronunciation is difficult when learning a new language is that we grow up training our ears to hear certain sounds and training our mouths to make those sounds. When we learn a new language like English, we have to train both our ears and our mouths to work differently. The other difficulty is that English is not completely phonetic. Some say 80 to 85% of English is phonetic, but a large part is not. This means that when we see a word, the way we say it is not always how it looks. But don't worry, this technique will help with both of these challenges. Okay, so normally, what we do is something called front chaining, and I'm going to explain exactly what that is. But what I'm going to teach you in this lesson, the secret, is something called back chaining, and that's what we will practice now. Let's take our first example and do what people normally do, even teachers, even ESL teachers. When they're teaching in classrooms, they don't normally spend that much time on pronunciation because they don't have time. There's so much to teach, the class is big, and there are so many students. It's difficult to spend time on pronunciation, so naturally people have a harder time learning and mastering it. If you think about it, when a child is born and growing up, they don't learn to read first. They just learn by listening. So, this is an opportunity to listen afresh, in a different way, to words so that you can reproduce the correct sound, the correct pronunciation. Example 1. Pronunciation. Okay, so let's take our first example. The word pronunciation. By the way, a lot of people do not say this word correctly. Now let's do it in the standard way, front chaining, and see what happens. In front chaining, we start pronouncing or saying the word from the front and move forward. So if I were teaching you how to say this word using front chaining, I would say pronunciation. I've divided it up here just to make it easier for you to see and hear the syllables. This long word happens to have 5 parts, 5 syllables, so it's quite long. Pronunciation. When a student hears that, they think, "Oh my God, I have to learn so many different sounds." And it feels a little scary because there are 5 sounds to follow. Now, what happens when you feel scared or nervous about something? Your brain shuts down. You don't learn as effectively. You don't learn as well as when you're happy and relaxed. So the advantage of learning through the other system, the other technique, called back chaining is that you feel much more relaxed. With front chaining, you had to learn 5 different sounds. But look what happens when we use back chaining. Back chaining, a simpler way to learn. Pronunciation. Back chaining is a technique that teaches you how to pronounce words by starting from the end. Let's do that now and see what happens. We'll take just the last syllable. Tie-in. Say shun. That's it. All you have to learn right now is 1 sound, not 5. Now let's add the next part. -ciation, saycation. Now the next part, nunciation. Say nunciation. And finally, the full word, pronunciation. Why back chaining works. What happened? Especially if this word was new or strange to you, all you had to learn at first was 1 sound, not 5. So, it wasn't scary, it was manageable. It's something you can do, something you feel relaxed about. We're breaking down the word into small, manageable chunks, and when something is small and manageable, we feel much more relaxed. Your brain will cooperate with you much more easily this way. So, that's what I did. I backchained the word pronunciation for you. Example 2, information. Now, with the next example, I'm going to take it 1 step further. As I mentioned, English is not always phonetic. So, what if we backchained and wrote the word in a way that actually represents how it should be pronounced? Let's do that. Our next word is information. Front chaining would break it into 4 syllables, information. But let's back chain it, and this time I've written it phonetically, based on how it actually sounds, not how it's spelled. Phonetic back chaining. Let's break it down. -tion sounds like shun. Say shun. Mation sounds like mation. Say mation. Formation sounds like formation. Say formation. Information. Say information. Why this works, yes. There were spelling changes, but that doesn't matter here. We're not focused on spelling. We care about how the word actually sounds, so write it in a way that helps you say it properly, based on what you hear. How do you know the correct pronunciation? Go to a good dictionary. For example, the Cambridge English Dictionary shows you how to pronounce every word in both British and American English. At Bookish English, we usually teach American pronunciation. So, you can use any reputable online dictionary to learn the correct pronunciation and then backchain it like this. That way, you will achieve a much more accurate pronunciation of the word. Using backchaining for phrases and sentences. You can use this technique not just for words, but also for phrases and sentences. However, I don't recommend doing this alone. If you're practicing full sentences, it's better to do it in a live classroom with a real teacher who is a native English speaker. They can teach you the correct intonation and everything else. But for words, this technique is definitely useful and effective. Let's try a few more words. You know that this is one of those lessons that will help you make a big breakthrough in pronunciation, right? Let's keep going. Good. I'm glad you know that. Let's get started. Example 1. February. All right, this word, let's try front chaining first. February. Okay, now let's try it the other way, through back chaining. Ready? Rue. Say it after me. A rue. February. Okay? This is actually a word that many students mispronounce because they often say February, but it's not February. It's February. Re. Ruer. February. Now you've got it. Good. Example 2. Wednesday. Let's back chain it. Are you ready? Look how easy it gets when you actually just listen. Don't look at the word. Wednesday. Now, let's back chain it. Dash day. Wednesday. Did you see how easy it became? When we did two things, we back chained it. We wrote it phonetically. We wrote what we should actually be saying. Day. Wednesday. Good. Example 3. Ambassador. Let's back chain it. Are you ready? Door. Sador. Bassador. Ambassador. Good. Very good. Notice that even though it's spelled with an A, the actual pronunciation isn't ambassador. It's ambassador. So let's do it again. Dash door. Sador. Bassador. Ambassador. Now you've mastered the correct pronunciation of this word. And by the way, you can apply this to many other words that end like this. Example 4. Knowledge. So many letters. So many useless letters. At least when it comes to pronunciation, right? Let's see what happens when we back chain it and write it phonetically. Are you ready? Lidge. There are really only two parts to the pronunciation of this word. Knowledge. Now, isn't it much easier? Don't you find it much more enjoyable to say this word this way? I hope so. Example 5. Psychiatrist. Okay, now let's try. Psychiatrist. Again, so many letters, but let's start from the end. This time, you try it first. Did you get it? Let's try together. Minus trist. A trist. Chi a trist. Psyche a trist. Excellent. Why back chaining works. If you were able to back chain these words, then you can back chain any word. Remember, this is a professional strategy used by linguists, language experts, actors who need to master different accents, voice coaches, and public speakers. When actors need to play a British or Australian role, for example, they use this technique to master the correct pronunciation. And you can do it too. Final thoughts. I'm so glad you watched this lesson today. This technique will save you so much time and help you make a huge breakthrough in your pronunciation. If you enjoyed this lesson and haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that now. That way, you can continue getting lessons that will save you years of time in your English learning journey. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.